So this is this week's pole work setup. It's sort of like a V with poles. I started off with Freddie just trotting down the centre. So if you trot down the centre, there's 5 trot poles. And this really makes you focus on straightness and rhythm. I did this on both reins, so here I'm just changing my diagonal and coming on the other rein. As you can see at this moment, Fred's a little bit backwards in his trot and he's got his neck coil back. But as he runs through this exercise and working through the poles, he gradually starts to relax. That was nice. So I think we'll continue videoing. So this time we go down, if I'm heading towards the poles, we go slightly to the right where there's just 3 poles to trot down. So again, focusing on the turn onto the poles to make sure it's accurate, focusing on your rhythm and your straightness. And then when we change rein this time, we come down the other side of the poles. So there's like 2 trot poles, a gap, which was like a canter pole stride, and then a trot. What actually you've got to do here is just maintain your rhythm without the pole. And Fred finds this really difficult and he attempts to pop into canter. Take 2. So down the 3 poles on the right. Nicely done. Changing the reins. Starting to open his frame a little bit on that long side. That looks better through the neck. Oh, then he comes back at me. Keeping the rhythm through the turn. So now we're coming down the other side of the poles. Trots over the first, manages to keep his rhythm, pops back into canter. So, but this is a work in progress for me and Fred, and you'll see through the other exercises that we need to work on his opening his shoulder. So now we're cantering. So we're just there cantering over the peak of the V, and obviously Freddie can't help himself. His bouncy board is activated, and we're popping a little extracurricular move. So staying on the left rein, we then make a slightly shallower turn and come to the very outside of the V, which is just nice 1 stride canter, which obviously is very exciting for Frederick. Coming on the right rein, coming up the way upwards over the poles this time, so going over the peak of the V. He's come a little backwards in his canter again, he always does. The only time you really get a decent cant out of Fred is when he's jumped. Making a shallower turn and then coming over the 1 stride. There, that's a slightly better, more open canter. Oh, and a little buck just to say how much he's having a good time. And then he's back at me, and another little buck, just can't help himself. Monsieur Bouncy Butt. This is just showing some pictures when he did actually give me some nice work. And that's his usual pose. So this is day 2 of me using the poles. And now we're trotting diagonally across them just to get a little bit more open rhythm. Now, as I said with yesterday's session, when Fred has to open his shoulder, he finds it easier just to pop into canter. This is definitely something I'm focusing on my flat. So as we're coming around the corner, he pops into canter. Now, when you trot straight down these poles, these are like 4.5 of my fairy steps. When you're coming diagonally across like this, it's 6, so it's actually a much bigger distance. There we've got some opening of the shoulder, bigger trot, and he nicely trotted through. Trying to keep that openness in the rhythm as we come to them the other way. Oh, we've kicked that pole and it's made it slightly wider, so he's popped into canter again. So what we actually ended up doing was rolling the poles back a little, so they were still wider than 4.5, but not as wide as 6. And then Freddie found it quite easy. So rather doing it again and again and him just popping into canter, we made it so it was doable. And then over the week, I'll roll the pole back out again and then hopefully get that 6-stride trot. But as you can see, that's a lot better and he's more confident doing it. And there's a picture just showing that openness in his shoulder. Really happy with that shot. Look at the openness there. Good boy, Freddie. So then day 3 with these poles, we're just circling around them, but we're spiralling. So I start off with a bigger circle and then we spiral in. Freddie's a bit of a head shaker, twisting his head, but as you see, as we're working this exercise, pushing him in and out, you're getting him more from the inside leg over to the outside hand. He becomes more secure in the contact, and then he actually starts to give me a little bit of nice work. Very happy with that there. Maybe his nose was overbent, but much better. Not so much flicking. So we're back out on the bigger circle again, and then coming in on the little one. Really happy with that. And I like just having something to focus my circle around, so the small circle's just either side of the blue pole and then pushing it back out bigger. And then we go on the right rein. This is a rein Freddie really struggles with. He doesn't step through quite as good with the inside hind, so we don't get quite as good a shape, but again, it's just work in progress. So smaller circle, trying to maintain the rhythm, maintain the shape and get a little bit of flexion. And then pushing him back out. You can see when you're pushing back out, you get that security in your contact, and he just offer a little bit of stretch for at least 2 strides before poking his head back in the air where Freddie likes it. Couple of nice strides of trot there. Very happy with that, Freddie, well done. Keeping that rhythm, keeping him pushed out. There, look at him, just stretched his neck for 2 strides at least. And that's what we're aiming for. Maybe next time I'll get 3 or 4, but it's just the progression. And then the final exercise I do with these poles is working through like a bit of a figure of 8. So I'm doing it here first in walk so you can see it. So I come through the poles, and as you go through the poles, you're aiming for straightness. And as you come out of them, you're changing the bend. And I think a little bit of neck bend and change just gets them flexing over the wither, gets them a little bit softer. Freddie was anticipating trot then, eager to crack on. Little head shake just to prove that he's a tinker. Good, so then we do pick it up in trot, and we're just working on keeping him. So here we want a little bit of left bend. We're trying to maintain the rhythm too, but he's backed off a little bit. Then straightness through the poles, and then changing the bend. Good. And just for a few strides he offers his openness in his frame, keeping that. Back through the poles, a little bit of straightness again, and then changing the bend. This is a really nice exercise for warm up or cool down, really, to be fair. I could have a little bit more activity in the trot, but he's a bit of a lazy arse. And that's it, good. And then straightness, and then bend. My straightness could have been better than Joanne. Tut tut. Straightness, and back to walk, letting him have a little bit of a stretch of his neck. I always like, after trot work, to give him a little stretch of his neck. And then there's a couple of pictures here just showing a few strides when Freddie's opened his frame. Now I know his nose is probably a little bit down and here it's a little bit up, but he's slightly more open from the frame.